Good evening, distinguished guests. Welcome to Mnsbc. Tonight, we will be hosting a discussion on predictions about the development of the story and play of Macbeth, with opposing perspectives from two expert individuals. As the moderator of tonight's discussion, I would like to start by providing some context and background on the play before delving into a summary of the first four acts. Macbeth is a tragedy that explores the themes of ambition and power. Set in medieval Scotland, the play follows the rise and fall of the titular character who is a noble warrior who is tempted by a prophecy that he will become king. Driven by his ambition and egged on by his wife, Macbeth sets out on a bloody path of murder and treachery that leads to his eventual downfall. Now onto the summary of the first four acts. Act 1. The play opens with three witches discussing their plans to meet after a battle. Then we are introduced to Macbeth and Banquo, two Scottish generals who have just fought in the battle. They encounter the three witches, and the witches tell them about a prophecy in which Macbeth will become the king, and Banquo's children will become heirs to the throne. After being obsessed with this prophecy, Macbeth is egged on by his wife, Lady Macbeth, and eventually murders King Duncan. After he murders King Duncan, he becomes the king, which fulfills the first part of the prophecy. Now on to Act 2. After the murder, Macbeth is plagued with guilt. He also becomes paranoid that other people may try to take his position as king. This eventually leads him to murder his best friend Banquo. He also tries to murder Banquo's son Fleance, but Fleance eventually escapes. Now moving on to Act 3. Macbeth hires assassins to kill Banquo's son Fleance and other nobles who he sees as a threat. He then attends a banquet where he sees the ghost of Banquo again, which makes him even more disturbed. Lady Macbeth tries to calm him down, but he decides to seek out the witches again for more predictions. Now moving on to Act 4. The witches give Macbeth a series of cryptic prophecies, including a warning to beware of Macduff, who is another English noble. Macbeth orders the murder of Macduff's family, and Macduff flees to England to join forces with Malcolm, who is King Duncan's son. Meanwhile, Lady Macbeth becomes consumed with the guilt of killing King Duncan and begins sleepwalking and hallucinating. She reveals her guilt to a doctor and a gentlewoman who watch her as she sleepwalks and talks about the murder of King Duncan. This concludes my summary of the first four acts. I look forward to hearing the insights from our distinguished panel of experts. Now, I would like to invite our two experts, an English political scientist and a spiritual shaman, who will provide their expert analysis on what is going to happen. Here is Bartholomew and Otis. Our first expert is an English political scientist who is going to give his perspective on what the outcome of the Macbeth versus Malcolm battle will look like. So, Bartholomew, with everything going on, what are the main points from your analysis?
The illegitimacy of Macbeth's claim to throne. First, he usurps the throne by killing Duncan, who is a rightful and well-respected king. This act goes against the principle of divine right of kings, a political theory prevalent in this period of time that saw kings as God's representatives on earth. Killing him to gain power and authority may seem more of a common thing a few hundred years ago, but nowadays, those who seek power through this kind of way, especially killing one that is kind and generous, usually won't be able to maintain stability and rule for long. Macbeth's action not only violates his principle, but also threatens the stability and legitimacy of the entire feudal system.
Wait. Hold up. Very early on, however, when Macbeth and Banquo encountered the witches, they informed both of them of the prophecy that Macbeth will be king and also Thane. And although we could doubt the witches early on, we learned that Macbeth becomes the Thane, and therefore it verifies what the witches say might be true, and that Macbeth might become king later on. However, The witches and Hecate are also unearthly entities that are characterized as malevolent creatures in Macbeth. And therefore, the witches and later on Hecate, who also gets involved, have been tampering with Macbeth and his decisions since very early on. And therefore, I think Macbeth is destined to be doomed.
Interesting perspectives from both sides. What do you think, Bartholomew, is the reason for Macbeth to do these actions, and what will be the consequences?
So I think the role of ambition is a really big thing here. His ambition drives him to commit regicide and siege power. This illustrates the dangers of unchecked ambition in politics and the corrupting influence it can have on individuals who hold power. From what I've heard about Macbeth and his actions, ambition is not inherently evil, but rather it's the excess and imbalance that can lead to catastrophic consequences.
Okay, so Otis, what is your insight on these actions?
So, I believe in the natural way of things, and breaking this cycle never ends well. As Malcolm was always the rightful heir to the throne, though tampered with by Macbeth, Malcolm was always meant to be the natural heir. And by committing regicide, Macbeth goes against God and also nature. And this interference with nature also caused several unnatural occurrences to happen. For example, Duncan's horses, they eat each other. And also we see that it is nighttime at day. And in addition to that, we also hear about the owl eating the fiercer falcon. And so when Macbeth disrupts the social and political order by murdering Duncan and usurping the throne, nature goes off rail as well. And in addition to this, he also commits other unnatural acts, including going against his own conscience, as he follows what Lady Macbeth pressures him to do, like killing Duncan and pursuing his ambition. And so Lady Macbeth also acts unnaturally by being commanding and antithetical to how a woman is supposed to act.
So, we've heard a lot about Macbeth. What about Malcolm?
After being crowned prince, Malcolm should be next in line for throne, following Duncan's death. But the fact that he and Donalbain immediately chose to flee to England and Ireland, respectively, is extremely questionable. Although we don't really know the true intentions of him fleeing to England, I believe that the reason for this is due to his feelings of inferiority, the lack of confidence, and the fear of Macbeth. Therefore, if he originally decided to stay in Scotland and take back what should have been his, he would have not been a good king whatsoever because of his weak personality and lack of experience.
Thank you for that insight, Bartholomew. Now, Otis, what are your predictions for the outcome of the battle between Macbeth and Malcolm?
Thank you for asking. If a war were to ever occur amidst Malcolm and Macbeth, I believe that Malcolm, as the natural heir, would undoubtedly prevail, as Macbeth represents malevolence and the natural, while Malcolm symbolizes nature. And as the natural heir to the throne, it is only reasonable that Malcolm usurps the unholy ruler Macbeth to reestablish his rule as king.
Thank you for your insight, Otis. What about you, Bartholomew?
So, like Otis, I think that if there was to be a fight between Macbeth and Malcolm, based on the current circumstances, I believe that Malcolm, accompanied by Macduff and Seward, will be able to come out on top. With Malcolm avenging for his father's death and Macduff avenging for his entire family's death, it gives them greater motivation compared to Macbeth, which is merely protecting the throne that he acquired through unscrupulous means to win the war.
Thank you for your time, both of you. This is MNSBC, and we will see you tomorrow.